Welcome to For the Long Run, the podcast exploring the why behind what keeps runners running long, strong, and motivated. I'm your host, Jonathan Levitt. Through personal and professional connections in the running world, I have the privilege of getting to know some amazing athletes. I've always been fascinated by the psychological aspect of running, and this podcast is aimed at exploring this and much more. I hope you enjoy. And welcome back. I am here today with Rochelle Basil. Rochelle, thanks so much for joining in.
Thank you for having me. This has been a welcome treat I've been looking forward to during isolation.
Totally. And likewise, I use these podcasts as a way to have a fun conversation with friends. So thanks for humoring me on that. So first question before we dive into it, who is Rochelle?
Oh my goodness. That is the Rochelle 2020 is very different to Rochelle 2019. So I guess today I am a mover, not physically moving like boxes and things, but moving bodies, or trying to move my body in space. I am a coach, wife, and what else? I guess that's kind of the trifecta.
That's a good starting point. And for those with an ear on your voice, where are you from?
I am from New Zealand originally, so I apologize if anyone has any difficulty with the accent. Most of it has sort of dropped off, but every now and again something will catch me, or I'll say a weird word, and people are like, "Huh?"
It's funny, like only a few of the words come out with an accent. It's like I lived with a couple of guys with very thick Boston accents in college, and I don't have one, but only with a few words does it come out. So it's,
or if you've had too many glasses of wine.
Exactly, too many beers. Well, awesome. So the podcast here is exploring the why, understanding what keeps runners running long, strong, and motivated. And so I think it's fascinating to chat with athletes that have been successful or are doing interesting things in the sport. And you sort of check all those boxes. And you've had an interesting journey over the last couple of years. So for those that don't know, do you want to sort of give a quick summary of the last couple of years of running for you?
Yeah. So it's been super exciting, and I mean, continues to, as life does, take interesting pivots when we do and don't expect. So actually you and I connected fairly early back in my return to running, which was, I would say, like mid 2016. So I started running after a 5-year break post collegiately, and I wanted to break 4 hours in the marathon because that seems like a good round number. And having had, sort of prior collegiate experience, I ran for a week and it was terrible, but eventually I started, getting back into my groove. And admittedly, I sort of came into that groove a little quicker than most people would if they just picked up running. But, I did have this sort of higher baseline level that I was eventually coming back to. So I ran, just sort of, I don't even think I was wearing a watch or anything, the end of 2016. And then it spiraled out of control in a good way. I guess snowballed is probably a better word. It was, oh, I want to break 4. Oh, there's a marathon in Boston. Oh shit, you have to qualify for that. What's the time for that? 3:30. Oh, I bet I could break 3. 2:45. Oh, maybe we'll go to the Olympics. I'm still wired as a very all or nothing human. But I've definitely come in this last year much more towards midline. And what was the question?
That's a good summary of your last couple of years. So it's fascinating. So I had somebody on the podcast recently, I think episode 66 or 67, Teal Burrell, who went from a 4:07 marathon to a 2:39. your first was, your goal was 4, and you beat that handedly. So what was that first finish line like?
Oh, it was so bizarre. And just kind of weird too, because we actually went into that first marathon. So I was coming off of a stress fracture, because initially when I started running, I thought that I could coach myself because,
Mm-hmm.
I was young and dumb and thought I could do what I did in college. So I was doing my 10-minute mile jogs. And then I started running in the 8s. And then I thought, okay, like we must be ready for some workouts. So I did what all people do when they're in charge of themselves and fail to look at the big picture or actually take in the data, and ramped up too quickly, got injured. And then I started working with a coach, and there was a fairly quick turnaround to when I wanted to sort of return to run and, try run a marathon. And, I was sort of, I guess, allowed to run the marathon if I was going to run it as a workout, which was perfectly fine. So I think the workout was something like 3 by 5 minutes. So 3 by 5 minutes. Yeah, that's all I ran for. 3 by 5.
26 by mile at goal marathon pace.
I think that is my favorite tweet I've ever seen. I think the BAA put that out a couple of years ago. It's like, today's workout is 26 times a mile. So the first marathon was, and I'm so thankful for my first marathon experience not being quote unquote a marathon. I was nervous about covering 26 miles because I think the longest I'd done going in was 16 or 17 miles. But I remember getting to mile 17, and, each time I passed someone or I looked down at my watch, I'm like, holy shit, this is the furthest I've ever run. This is a new PR. This is a new PR. And then it was Indy. So the back end of the Indy course is kind of apocalyptic, which is fitting for this time in our life. People were just bending over and walking and stopping. And I was thinking, oh my goodness, I'm next. But I started feeling better and better. And then I got to mile 20, and they sort of say your name and what you're on pace for. And I think that was the first time I realized that I could have, I don't even know what I had to, I could have run 8.5-minute miles for the remaining 10K and still broken 3. So that last 10K or last 6 and a bit miles, I was just so excited, because it had been kind of unexpected. I hadn't really gone in, or we didn't really have a huge goal plan. It was just execute this plan and good things will happen. And that's sort of very similar to, how I am with my athletes. It's, let's not get hung up on the specifics. We need to be data driven, obviously, but in terms of GPS, I mean, who are you to let a piece of technology tell you what you can or can't do? Or how you feel on a given day. There are so many other variables that these smart watches and devices are not that smart at picking up on.
I love that. So you mentioned that you're a coach as well. How did that happen?
So I think, and a lot of us sort of came into coaching in this way too, when I started running again. And, I was in graduate school and joined a couple of local running groups. And I was working on my PhD in cognitive neuroscience at the time, but I was becoming more and more interested in the exercise physiology and kinesiology realm. So I was starting to read and delve into that in my free time, which is, how cool and exciting I am. And still my free time is reading books on running, which I think that means I'm in the right place. And so people started picking my brain on a few things, and ideas. And what do you think about this? Or what do you think about that? And then I started sort of, coaching, like, very unofficially, not for anything, just to sort of help some friends out. And then I met Mary, and almost 3 years ago, we started LRP, and it's just been the most amazing, again, as life, sort of pivots and turns. We had no idea of the sort of community we would create, and just sort of, how our athletes really have become like our family and friends. And I get chills just thinking about it. It's just it's so fun.
So this is Mary Johnson of Lift Run Perform, a mutual friend of ours. I met Mary, I don't know, back in 2014 or 2015, and we've shared. I think the only times we've run together, we've run longer than 20 miles. Or actually, we did a half marathon together, which still remains my PR from 2016. So Mary and I have talked at length about taking that PR down and taking our marathon PRs down to much lower than where they are. I'll leave it at that. And,
oh my goodness. Yeah. Sorry. I just had this flashback. Thinking of marathon PRs, I was listening to your podcast with David Roach. It must have been a week or so ago, because I love a lot of the things he has to say. And he had published something recently that I was like, I need to listen to this again. And I sent it to one of my athletes, and she texted me back like with all the dying laughing emojis. And she said her goal in life is to have your quote unquote same stoke level at the finish line, so that she just like cusses someone in the face that she's so excited. And I was like, oh my God, I have to tell John Liss. He's going to get such a kick out of it.
That was the best. That was the best. So that was at the Providence Marathon last spring. And I turned the last corner and I saw 2:59 low on the clock. It was like 2:59:20 or something. And I just started like screaming, and there are photos of it, and those are my favorite photos. I just like to scream at the end of races. I don't know what the deal is, but so I crossed the finish line, and I'm just like shouting like "fuck yeah," like very loud, and and then I realized I'm screaming in this poor woman's face, and she's trying to hand me a medal. And I realized what I had done, and I was like, "Oh my God, I'm sorry." She's like, "No, it's fine." But yeah, that was great. And so I talk a lot about the stoke level, as you talk about like data and metrics. I feel that that's like the best subjective measure possible.
Stoke level.
Yeah, the stoke level. That like if you're fired up to do the work and like get out and run, there's no better barometer for like, can you do the work, or should you be doing the work?
100%. And that's sort of like intrinsic internal motivation or drive is not something that any coach or anyone can, like, I can't be like, hey, Jonathan, you should run this race. Like, if you don't care for that race, if it's not exciting to you, we could have the best plan in the world. You could get the best weather day, but if you're not driven to something or a goal within yourself, and it doesn't even have to be like a time, right? It could be running like this really hilly run or something that's going to bring you so much joy. Like, that is the biggest motivating factor.
So how do you help athletes find that?
By slamming my head into a wall a lot and repeating that. I don't know. And I mean, obviously there are a lot of this current COVID situation is not nice, but from a coaching perspective and from a humanity standpoint, and just seeing my sort of athletes come into their own and sort of self-realize why they run has been like a really beautiful time and process. Even though it's been a month, I feel like everyone has developed, what typically takes 1 to 2 years or training cycles with athletes. And that is sort of becoming more process oriented, not just worrying about, well, I have to break 3. It's like, well, no, we have to
who fucking cares?
Like, we have to train smart, and we have to trust the process, and we have to, be kind to ourselves. And then, you know what, you're going to go out and you're going to crush 3. Like, don't even think about breaking 3. And now that all these arbitrary race days and times have been taken off the calendar, I mean, people are just crushing it, and they're feeling great. And they're just so thankful for, and here it is again, the joy, right? The joy that is running, and that bliss of just getting out and being free in a very unstable and uncontrollable environment. Oh, Sari, go away.
Yeah. So I love that. And I say who cares, not negatively, but I say who cares because yeah, there are no races to validate right now. And
100%.
I'm intentionally saying validate because we don't need these races to validate us to be runners. We don't need the race to, like, I stood on that start line in Providence, not caring if it was a 2, a 3, or a 4 at the start of my marathon. And I've now run all of those. And I think that that's the place that we need to be at in order to achieve that success. When you disassociate, and maybe your educational background could, elaborate on this a bit more than I could, but when you disassociate from the outcome, you can perform better.
100%. Because I mean, you're freeing up cognitive space, right? And so your legs are going to feel however your brain is telling them. Like if you're running thinking, oh shit, I feel terrible. Yeah, you're going to feel terrible. If you're telling yourself, oh, I feel great. I mean, obviously it doesn't work all the time, but how many workouts have you started when you're running your warm up and you think, oh man, I should probably just bag this. Like this is not going to be my day. I'm not going to run well. And then for a second you forget and you start the workout and you get done an hour later. You're like, oh my goodness, I just crushed that. I can't believe I was going to hop back in the car and go home. Or races, especially the marathon too. I mean, the race is really, to me, a test of who can get out of a bad space the quickest. Because it's very rare that you're going to run 26 miles or 26.2 miles and feel like you're not a fucking unicorn.
Feel good the whole time. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Frankfurt
and if you feel
yeah, you're going to get maybe one of those days in your life where it's just sunshine and rainbows and unicorns. But the rest of it is life, right? And this is why we train. And this is why, this is why I meditate and practice yoga and do all these things. And when I was training, right, training prepares you for those experiences on race day. So if you have only perfect runs or things only go right, when you get to race day, and you start feeling bad, you don't know how to respond, right? You don't have that neuro control of how to have that conversation with yourself. Like, this is fine. Remember 3 weeks ago in your last 20-mile long run when you started running like 30 seconds slower than marathon pace, but you got yourself back. Like, you have that data to come back to and think, oh shit, like I've been there before. Let's go back there. And before you know it, you've sort of inversed that potentially not so good situation, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I think that for a lot of people, that's the exciting part, like figuring out what happens when things go south. So last fall I ran rim to rim to rim in the Grand Canyon. And prior to that, my longest time on feet was 7 hours. And that was over a 50K. And the Grand Canyon is just short of 45 miles. And my longest run leading up to that was a marathon. So I get to the North Rim. So I ran the 50K in 7:07, and I get to the North Rim in 7:20. So halfway through,
oh my gosh,
I've now gone longer than my longest run,
your longest time on feet
ever. Yeah. So then I was like, all right, what's next? Like,
this is when my feet fall off.
is this when my feet fall off? Yeah. No, it was like I got to the point of the known, and it was mostly fine with the exception of the first 6 miles downhill in the dark. And looking back at where I had come, I was like, everything from here on out is totally new, and things are going to get bad and go wrong. And they did, but they didn't for a while.
But what was your stoke level at that moment?
Like 4,000.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why we do this, because we're all crazy.
Yeah, so stoke level in that moment. So Anime Flynn was there with us, and she's a professional trail runner. She's been on this podcast. She was on back in June 2019, and she was doing a a fast north to south attempt. And so as she was going north to south and dropping in on the north side, we were coming out of the north side. And so she loves that stoke
Oh my
meter, or
God.
like the stoke is high. And so I just looked at her and I just started screaming. And she was like, and so the whole joke of this trip was we would say, let's fucking go all the time. And our car's license plate was LFG with three numbers after it. So,
oh my gosh.
so I was like, this is perfect. So we just started screaming that at each other, at 1:00 in the afternoon on at the north side of the Grand Canyon, when everyone's trying to have a casual afternoon. But so we get back in, and I'm running at the 50K mark, low sevens, and I'm like, this is now the longest I've ever run again, and I had happy legs. And we just let it rip while things were good. And 10 miles later was the absolute worst I've ever felt.
Stoke level rapidly declined.
So I took a video at the 50K and sent it to David. I was like, this is fucking amazing. And then 10 miles later, it was like mile 41, 42, or it was like 40. And we were in the middle of a 6.5 mile climb covering 5,000 feet. And with like 4 miles to go, it's still like 3 hours of walking uphill, like 3 hours of walking uphill after you've been doing that for an hour. And so it's just fascinating because you don't have another option at that point. Like, you can't get out any other way. So when your back is up against the wall, I think that's when you learn a lot about yourself. And I don't even remember the question at this point, but
this is a podcast, right? There is no script, but I don't remember the question either. So full disclosure, but running for so many of us is sort of our therapy and our outlet, right? So it keeps us sane, but it's also the thing that makes us the most insane, right? Like, you're saying at 50K, you're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And 2 minutes later, you're like, I would like to be doing anything else but this. And I do not, like, mentally, I'm not in a very good place. So it can be so polarizing, right? Within ourself. Can be.
Yeah. Devin Yanko, yep, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, Devin Yanko uses the phrase "work the problem," and the problem is going to present itself at some point, and you don't know what it is. And the fun is, getting through it.
Oh, well, the universe always gives you what you provide, but I have been fantasizing about a rim to rim to rim for my birthday, so we'll have to chat another day on that.
Yes, that's awesome.
Because I'm also like terrified of dying in the Grand Canyon, doing something stupid.
Yeah, I must have talked about blocking things out. I must have blocked out because I had been there before. I'm terrified of heights, so I must have blocked out any prior experience where you could see these 1,000-foot cliffs.
There you go. That's your brain. He's helping you out.
Exactly. So one of the things that I love that you've done with LRP was the Breaking 3 last fall. Let's talk about that. What was that experience like?
Yeah, so Breaking 3 was actually so Mary and I started doing group training programs probably maybe 2 falls ago. I would have to go back and fact check, but as a way to sort of allow more runners and athletes to sort of enter our LRP community, right? So when you do one-on-one coaching, obviously we can only work with so many athletes and provide the quality of care and service that we do. And it's also cost prohibitive for some folks. So we were looking for a way to make it a little cheaper for her and I to sort of divide and conquer the work. And we're also the same person. So it's like a very natural sort of pairing for us. We can get in the group sort of email or a coaching account and converse with athletes, and it's very seamless. So we did a couple of group training programs we started off doing the full majors. So we had New York, Chicago, Marine Corps, and then we did Boston the following year. And then actually we had another coach who came to LRP, and herself and Mary sort of spearheaded the sub-3 group in Indy last fall. And they did such a phenomenal job. I think they had, I think it was like 9 or 14, but an absurd percentage of these women broke 3 and performed so well. And it just ignited this massive sense of community. So even though there were, approximately a dozen LRP athletes running, for weeks and weeks and weeks, the emails we were getting from our other athletes and people within the community, everyone was congratulating me as if I'd just run, like, congratulations to, the LRP ladies. And Mary and I were like, oh my gosh, like, this is, we need to sort of really bolster this team and community sort of feel, because, when it comes from the top, everyone is lifted, right? So we really saw, it was just it just became sort of so clear to us that we still can create this really great community feel and sense in an online way. So we've always done meetups and things wherever we can, but now we're really working to sort of connect our athletes a little further. And, since then, my last year, I've sort of become much more focused on sort of rehabilitative movement and building community, because like my last year of recovery and rehab and getting hurt, the one constant was my LRP athletes. And they were such a lifeline when I thought that I had nothing left, or that, it wasn't, this is getting deep, that things weren't worth doing or carrying on for. But like, all my athletes were just so steadfast. And I think that's what made it so easy for me to sort of put my hopes and dreams running wise sort of on a shelf, or I don't even know where they are. They're somewhere, but it just seems like a very natural and easy thing to do. I was like, oh my gosh, like, I have to do everything I can for my athletes, because this community is so amazing. And if I don't put like my soul into it, like, I haven't done anyone a service.
That's awesome.
I could waffle about how amazing they are all day long. I mean, not waffle, but I mean, it's very cool. So sub-3 was, oh my gosh, Siri keeps wanting to listen to our talk. Sub-3 was really, I feel like it was so much more, it just really sort of laid this foundation for our next sort of, community building, which has definitely been, sort of training or super helpful for this time in quarantine or isolation, because, we're not connected in the same way that we have been previously. And most people, or most of our athletes, or most, folks in their 20s, 30s, 40s who are running, started running later in life, right? So first it was a social outlet. And so now we've taken away sort of the pillar of why people were running or sort of came to running. So we're trying to provide community, in other ways if it's not in the face or in the flesh.
Yeah, I love it. And I think it's a really interesting time. And you referenced it before, like figuring out what to do in these times and why you do it. And I'm loving the discourse that's going on, particularly on Instagram, with professional runners having that same introspection. Like, what am I doing? What am I bringing to the world? What am I, why am I running right now? And I think a lot of these athletes are struggling with that question. And then others are like reconnecting with why they started running, and just running, and maybe not even using their watch, or maybe not doing workouts, and just, as Shalane Flanagan put it, stuffing the silo with miles, so that whenever we get back to racing, or sharpening from a training perspective, we'll be in a much different place.
Oh my goodness.
Mentally and physically. And then, yeah. And the goals, the race goals, I think will be like less important in a good way.
Absolutely. I mean, I think come whenever, we can race again, people are going to be, like to Shalane's point, the silos are going to be just chock-a-blocked. There was a good Kiwiism for you. Oh boy. I'll have to tell my mother I said that. Chock-a-block.
All right, walk me through that one.
Chock-a-blocked is like, so I guess maybe it sounds like an abbreviation for chocolate block, but chock-a-block means it's just like so full, it's bursting. You're welcome.
Nice.
But I mean, everyone's silos are going to be, I'm going to have to keep saying it now, chock-a-blocked, right? With this. And as long as, the training is done, people aren't just crushing, this high end speed or sort of tuning, because there's no point in that right now, right? It should be focusing on the fundamentals and building a really strong base. But I mean, we're going to see some crazy, but our athletes we work with on the pro side, on, people coming into ultra, people on the ultra side that have probably been spending a lot more time on their feet. It's going to be really interesting. And two, I think people are going to be less sort of hung up on this race goal, right? Because they already had a lot of their races already taken away from them. So now when we're, training and building up again, the goals are kind of different. Like with my athletes right now, the goal is to, our goals are, I mean, it depends on a case by case basis, but, not necessarily time focused. It's to do these sorts of runs or feel this way or focus on mobility and strengthening, because now you're not commuting 2 hours a day. So I know you have 2 hours a day. So don't give me that nonsense that you don't have time for it right now. And lo and behold, people are feeling pretty good. Who I do feel the worst, the bodies that have been worst impacted that I've seen with my, a lot of my athletes and a lot of my friends are teachers. And I don't think any of us realized how active teaching is, especially in the like elementary and middle school age, right? These teachers are on their feet all day, and now everyone's sort of sitting on Zoom. So their, hips and glutes and low back are feeling a little creaky. Man, our quarantine brains are really good at following trains of thought right now. So the gist is here.
Yeah, a lot of changes all around. So your background in sort of how the brain works, how do you bring that into your coaching?
So by training, oh my goodness, it's so interesting, and I'm so thankful for my training sort of in the scientific method, because it's really allowed me to be a really good source finder in terms of all of these quote unquote studies or information that's sort of put out into the universe. Because it's hard to sort of decipher some of these articles and things that come out. And so in terms of, sort of what your graduate training is, if it's, scientifically based, it really doesn't matter if your training is in, physics or kinesiology or cognitive neuroscience. I mean, you have specialties within the subject matter, but your ability to decipher like fact from non-fact or statistics that have been skewed or are not particularly representative really gives me a good filter and a good way to sort of, delve into the exercise physiology and kinesiology, I guess, black hole of literature, because there is so much. And from a psychological standpoint, I actually did a clinical externship at the National Institute of Health when I was in my graduate program out in Virginia. So I've, had a lot of work in a more clinical settings, interviewing techniques. So it really helps me work with my athletes when we're getting to the whys of things, or sort of even, putting on my little therapist hat from time to time, just being like, this is fine. You feel this way. It doesn't mean you're a bad person or you failed. It means you're human. Like, we're all human, And I think just being able to sort of look at things from a scientific perspective really is super helpful. And I mean, I'm such a loser. It's so much fun. I love nothing more than, I think it was maybe like 2 summers ago, like new guidelines were released on like postpartum running. And Mary and I was so excited. It was this like 60-page article, and we were just like drooling over it. We're like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. The research is so great. You know, some of my friends are PTs and we're all going back and forth. We're like, this is so great. You know, and the cool thing with science and, you know, it segues into coaching and training is we're always learning, right? What was right for the human body in the 50s through 70s, which is when a lot of the early sort of aerobic based studies were coming out in terms of the body's response to training and adaptation. Like, we live in a very different world to what we did or what people did in the, 50, 60 years ago. So are those studies particularly relevant to human performance now? From like a structural standpoint, yes, but now we think about things like stress and load and cumulative fatigue and the lifestyles we live. So our life in 2020 is so different. I mean, God, our life in, what month is it? April of 2020 is so different to April of 2019.
Well, this
right?
April is five times longer than 2019's April.
Oh my God. This April is, oh, wow. If you've ever wondered what it's like to live in a time warp, I mean, I said to someone the other day, I was like, the great thing, like, have you ever wondered what it's like to live in a time warp? Now we know. And she's like, you're a weirdo. I was like, but now we know what it feels like.
Just in case you were curious. So,
Yeah.
So what's keeping you even keeled and, following your North Star in this time?
Meditating. I guess I'm still probably pretty tightly strung, but after I had surgery last, goodness, when was that? I see I've done a good job of blocking this out. I had surgery last June on my ankle, and my sort of recovery was super rocky just in terms of, I was having this like pretty major identity crisis. What am I going to do? I was anxious. I was depressed. And my yoga teacher, she's phenomenal too, and has become a dear friend. And she's a great teacher because she's always suggesting things. It's never sort of like force feeding, like, you have to do this. This is the magic sauce. You need it. She sort of let me come to it on my own. And I would notice on the days that I would meditate, I would be much less anxious, or I would have just good ideas, or, my overall everything would just go better that day. And then being me, I was like, oh, let me experiment. Let me test and see what happens on the days I don't meditate. Well, spoiler, I'm like a total wreck. But I wanted more and more data points. So I was like, oh, it just happened once. That's a coincidence. And then I started noticing, before I made it a habit, some days I would forget, and I'd get to lunchtime and be just kind of wound up, or have this kind of higher baseline level of anxiety, or would find that stupid things would throw me off course. So I really worked at making it a morning habit, right? I meditate before I make coffee in the morning, and those two are mutually exclusive, right? Like, I don't not make coffee in the morning, ergo, I do not meditate.
Right.
And it's been, I've drunken the Boulder Kool-Aid, and that's totally fine. It's been just a very amazing experience. And it's hard to explain if you're not like in a regular practice, but it's so grounding. And, you can sit for 2 minutes, you can sit for 20 minutes, just that time to sort of be just still, I think. Also looking at the mountains helps. I love
definitely. we'll get to that tasty Boulder Kool-Aid you referenced in just a second, but I want to know, what does meditation look like for you?
For me, it really varies. I mean, even though I've been practicing fairly consistently, some days I really struggle just being still, right? Or I'll get on the mat. I always like to sit on the ground, like on my seat bones, be upright, especially in the morning. I'm very big, and my athletes and Mary will laugh if they're listening. I'm very big on intention. Everything, we don't do stuff for the sake of doing stuff. That's a waste of energy. And I'm very, I'm a cognitive miser. I'm very lazy with my resources for things that don't need my energy and emotion. So the intent for me of meditating in the morning is to, wake myself up. So why would I be laying down? To me, that makes no sense, right? If I lay down, my body is getting signals to calm down and go to sleep. And I'm trying to, work in the opposite. So I will sit. Sometimes I listen to music. If I'm feeling particularly sort of like ungrounded or worried about things, or can sense that I'm going to have trouble sitting without, looking at my phone or going to get coffee, or not like just letting things go, I'll do a guided meditation. I have the, I think it's like an annual membership for Headspace. They have some really great guided meditations in there. And I've been doing a few of them recently that, doing more specific things on, dealing with, being in quarantine or dealing with uncertainty and things like that. But often I'll just sit like in silence and just focus on my breath and just practice, as thoughts come in, just letting them go and not fixating, and being able just to have something sort of enter your consciousness and just say, and you're done, or this isn't your time. And truly being able to detach from it is such a liberating feeling. And I wish that everyone could experience that sort of that freedom of just like something coming in. And I'm sure like you could probably think of an example of, we all have these pervasive thoughts or things that pop in, but just for it to come in, and similar to the marathon, right? When shit starts hitting the fan, like not now, another time, maybe. And just to kind of deflect it is a really cool skill. And like anything, it takes practice, and it's never perfect, which is, to me, is sort of a forever learner of all sorts of things, is a really appealing and attractive notion.
Very cool. Let's circle back to the Boulder Kool-Aid. When did you move out there?
Oh, it's good.
I know.
not that I would know. I haven't been to Boulder in almost 2 months. We came out here. So Matt and I we were planning on moving out here. It must have like late summer last year. So if anyone is in the future, that was 20. So we moved out here in the summer of 2019. We were planning on coming out for a number of reasons, but a large proponent obviously was my running and training. And Matt loves it out here and was trying to, he started the push west a long time before I did. And he was accepted he's doing his MBA right now. So we were planning on moving out, and then we found out that I'd actually ruptured my peroneal tendon, and that it was so bad. There were no other options besides surgery. So we were kind of weighing the pros and cons of surgery in Virginia, starting rehab, then moving. And we ultimately made the decision for me to move out here early and have surgery and, be in the hands of one of the best surgeons in the country. So I came out in early June and had surgery, and actually stayed. This is how incredible the people that we work with are. One of my athletes, who is now one of my nearest and dearest friends, we were sort of conversing through all of this. And I said, well, I may come out early. We've got to see if, without lease and everything. And without a second of hesitation, I think I'd met her once in person, like in real life before. She was like, what's the soonest you can get out here? And I was like, well, this is a Thursday. The doctor said he could see me on Monday. And she's like, pack your car, get your butt out here. Like, you're coming to me. I'm going to look after you. Like, we're going to get you fixed and healthy again. And in the moment, I, agreed to it. And then, we got off the phone. I tell Matt, and then it sort of sinks in that I'm going to drive across the country by myself and have surgery and stay in a stranger's house. And her and her family are going to see me at my absolute worst for God knows how long. And so I call her back and I'm like, you know what? Actually, like, no, that was a stupid idea. I'm just going to wait the 6 weeks. She's like, that's the most preposterous thing I've ever heard. And she said, I know this is going to be hard. I know it's going to be uncomfortable, but you can do it. And I was just like, well, shit, here we are. So I threw everything I could get into my car and drove across the country. And heaven forbid, she saw me at my very worst. And it was such a cool, I mean, I do not wish to have that surgery and recovery again, but that experience and that bonding was like phenomenal and will be forever, we're forever connected because of that. So yeah, we're coming up on our 1 year anniversary, and I wasn't able to get out on any of the trails because all of last summer I was non-weight bearing until September. So we did get to go to I got to drink a lot of beer, which was probably great for my recovery. But just excited to get out and explore and play because this is, I don't have to tell you this. It's just such a beautiful and special place. And we're just so thankful to be here.
For sure. So what has the recovery journey looked like for you?
Do you have another hour? I'll give you the synopsis, which I think has been okay. And I think I'm perhaps overly resilient. I think resiliency in humans is a good thing, but I think I have probably maybe adapted too well to things happening. I'm like, oh, it's fine. So I had the repair done to my peroneal tendon last June. And unfortunately, once they got in there, the separation between the tendon, they were hoping that they could sort of reattach them together. But they ended up having to reattach just one end to its neighboring branch. And so the top of the tendon actually is just sort of hanging out in the top of my foot. So the return to run was always we weren't quite sure what that was going to look like, but I obviously still had very high hopes and dreams and ambitions for, running quickly and qualifying for teams. And so the rehab I was in a plaster cast for about 10 weeks. And then we switched to a boot. And then, I think in about 4 months, we were actually able to start, like my ankle was completely immobile that whole time because your peroneal tendon's one job is to stabilize your foot. So we had to make sure that, the sutures and everything had healed. And the problem with dealing with something that's a stabilizing muscle versus something that's strictly anterior posterior is it's very hard to load. So if you're rehabbing an Achilles tendon, you can load that much easier. The only way to load the peroneal tendon is to evert and invert your foot, which doesn't feel particularly good. Still doesn't feel particularly good. And I don't know if it ever will. So I was in this weird contorted, so it was my left ankle. So I was basically single leg RDLing on my right side for a very, very long time. And my right side got so strong that when I eventually started to run again, I developed so many compensatory sort of mechanisms that my right side was just way too strong. And eventually, it happened quite quickly, surprisingly, I broke my sacrum. And just to the right side of midline. And, we're further tested and we've seen that there are some pretty not ideal things going on with my feet. So again, we unloaded because, I had a broken bone. So another 8 weeks non-weight bearing. So now we're trying to come back with my ankle, which needed load to improve that it didn't get for an additional 6 to 8 weeks, plus a hip injury on the other side. So really my rehab is just been trying to get strong and building from the bottom up. So, each day I'm doing, footwork and just tons of little intrinsic things. And I've been using a MOBA board because my problem was that my big toe, my first metatarsal, is so immobile that my big toes were actually never making contact with the ground. So all of my weight was being distributed in my second through fifth metatarsals, which were not designed to bear the brunt of your whole body times 2 to 3 times in motion. So it's become apparent that that's something that I cannot, or, can no longer push off or pretend doesn't exist. Because even, running, I think I was running like 30 miles a week when my hip went. I'm not, to be able to go back if I ever want to. And I don't really know what my running looks like moving forward. And I think the nice thing is, with all of this happening, I was becoming so connected with my athletes in our community. I really didn't grieve the loss of my own running, which is kind of cool. And kind of as a competitive athlete, it kind of makes me question how competitive was I really, because I'm like, oh, I don't really care about my own running, right? I'm one person, but if I could give myself and help many, many more, that just makes sense to me. So that was sort of further validation that I'm on the right path for me.
That's awesome. What do the next couple of years look like for you?
The next, let's do the next couple of days, right? Oh, you're meaning years. So between now and the end of April. Got it.
Yeah.
Goodness. Hopefully just a lot of really awesome outside adventures, further connecting our Lift Run Perform athletes with, the wider running community. I'm hoping to do, more stuff in person, because that really, or, even just like, on the phone, that fills my soul up like nothing else. Like there is nothing for me that sort of connecting with my athletes is very similar to that finish line joy or euphoria. Once I meet up with my athletes or have a really good conversation with them, I'm just left buzzing for so long. So I know that that's something that I'm really, really drawn to. I have recently become certified in Pilates and rehabilitative movement. And just really trying to provide more of like a full service, I guess, or like more holistic and balanced approach to training, because, obviously we want our athletes to run fast and PR, but again, like circling back to the beginning, I think when you take a step back and balance your whole life, running is very easy. Running is friggin' hopping, right?
Yeah.
Like we get in our heads so much and we make it so complicated. So my goal is to just, help my friends and athletes and others, just within the community, to realize that it can be this really beautiful, balanced thing, and you still can perform very, very well. And sort of just equipping people with the tools to sort of come to that on their own, right? Because you're not going to have, a running coach forever. You're going to be running for the next 30 years of your life, right? You can't be paying someone forever. Maybe you can. Let me know where that money tree is.
Yeah.
But the goal is to make independent, strong-minded, intelligible, runners and athletes and humans, so that we can just stay healthy and, just operate at, an optimum level, because that's when good things happen. It's when we feel good. We're better people, spouses, parents, coworkers, just just humans, right? And that's important.
I love it. What do you wish people knew about you?
Oh, well, now they know that I say weird things like chockablock. Wish they knew about me. Oh, I'm trying to think of, well, I do have something exciting that I haven't shared with anyone that I
Let's hear it.
share on the podcast. So
An exclusive.
This is an exclusive. This is
a
for the long run
exclusive. Breaking
You
news.
you heard it here first. So we
Literally.
lost our dear Gracie, our Rhodesian Ridgeback. It'd be four weeks ago on Friday. And I had actually been talking to a breeder for over a year now out here in Denver, coincidentally. And in 2 weeks from today, our new little baby dog, in case anyone just like cut out for a little second, our newest little Rhodesian Ridgeback. Yeah.
That's
I keep
awesome.
wanting to post something and be like, our family's growing. And I'm like, oh, this is going to be, it could be, I'm not sure how it would be received. And being me, I'm like, oh, I would like to get a rise out of a few people. But yeah, so we will be getting a little puppy. So that makes me just so excited for the summer because I'm going to have a little trail bud.
That's awesome.
And yeah.
Well, thanks so much for coming on today. Where can we find you if we want to follow along on social media?
You can find me on Instagram. My handle is run.kiwi. And then we're also at Lift Run Perform. And then my sort of movement-y sort of things is at Peak Movement Collab. And I don't do Twitter. That's another thing that you can know about me. It's too much noise.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much. And hope to see you in Colorado soon.
Oh, please do.
With a dog.
Yes. Oh my God. You'll be all over it.
Awesome.
Sounds good.
That's it for today's episode. Like many long runs, it's sad when it has to end. I hope you join in next week on For the Long Run. And in the meantime, happy trails. If you've enjoyed this episode, it would mean a lot to me if you shared it so that others can find it and enjoy it too.